Hello, and thank you for taking your time to view our Feedback Week Game Jam project. The game we created is called Damage Control, a straightforward, if somewhat basic strategy game in which the player must decide which planes in the airspace of their country are going to be given permission to land, and which will be forced to return to their country of origin. My name is Brenton White, and I was the designer of the gameplay, as well as the creator of the music you're hearing now. Matthew Stark was the programmer of this game, and John Ferry served as the game's artist. So what is this game? It was our take on the Jam's theme, which was decisions, which in turn was closely related to our client for the Jam, NATS Holdings, the primary air navigation service provider for the United Kingdom. So without further ado, let's get into the game. The premise of this game follows the potential decisions that an air traffic controller may be required to make in regards to a crisis situation. Here we have a brief introduction presenting the premise, that being that the player will now be required to carefully manage a soon-to-be tense situation following an unnamed catastrophe of some description. For the first 5 turns, the player is slowly introduced to the mechanics of the game by their nominal superior named Colonel Equilus, as can be seen beneath his picture. His primary purpose is to quickly familiarize the player with the functions of the game, which for the most part boils down to making judgment calls on which planes land and which must be rerouted to their country of origin. As the player only has 3 active airfields, they will not be able to land all of the planes that the game will present to them. As explained here, whenever a plane is sent back to its home country, a hidden value is deducted from the relevant country's relationship score. The first few turns were balanced in such a way as to make the consequences of poor judgment relatively minor, although one of the countries, the country of Abertay, does start with a low value, which can make even minor mistakes painful in the future. To make things a little more merciful, some planes are able to maintain temporary holding patterns, which can allow the player to delay their landing for a turn or two. However, this in turn is ultimately a double-edged sword for the player, as it permitted us to throw more than just 3 or 4 planes at them in a single turn, allowing for more diversity in how the turns were structured. Given that the actual value of the aircraft is hidden from the player, we decided to include a passenger count and occasionally some data on the cargo in order to steer players into selecting certain craft over others. While most of the time this information is reliable for determining the value of an aircraft, there are a few red herrings that have been hyped up past their actual value, and others whose value is higher than one might otherwise assume. The core loop of the game revolves around trying to balance which countries are on good terms with the player's nation during this time of crisis, and which are not. The relationship score, represented by the colored bar to the right of each country's representative, is measured out of 100 points, with each plane sent back to them subtracting a set value from the total. It is also worth noting, however, that the starting values of the neighboring countries differ, with no nation starting at 100 points, and Abertay starting at a rather perilously low score of 40. As a final wrinkle in the equation, we decided to throw in a few planes of dramatically higher value than others. These have flashing red boxes attached to them so that they are difficult to miss. But if they are missed, the penalty to the player's relationship score with its nation is dire, sometimes equaling almost half of the entire bar. So what actually happens if the score of a country hits 0? Let's show you in a different playthrough. In this playthrough, the player has been reckless with their decisions, and has caused several of the country's scores to drop concerningly low. When a country's score hits 0, the player will receive a sternly worded message informing them that the country now believes they are conspiring against them in some fashion, and will be enforcing a no-fly zone over their airspace. In most cases, this will cause the player to lose access to one of their airports, reducing the number of planes they can take in. As a small reprieve, the player will also no longer have to deal with planes from the country they have aggravated, and any current planes in the air belonging to that country can no longer be selected, leaving after the next turn. If the player loses too many countries, namely 3 in any order, they will automatically fail the game regardless of which turn it is on. The player wins the game if they successfully survive 16 turns without losing 3 countries, with a customized victory screen based on their performance. Thank you again for taking the time to view our presentation of our game, Damage Control.